I never imagined Christmas could turn into a nightmare. We were celebrating at home, laughter and holiday cheer filling the room, until HOA Karen showed up. She always acted polite, but that night, something in her eyes told me trouble had arrived. And then, in a moment I'll never forget, she slapped my deaf daughter right in front of everyone. My heart stopped. Time froze. The room went silent. My little girl, Lily, looked at me, confused and hurt, her hands frozen in mid-sign. Everyone around us was in shock, unsure whether to intervene. I wanted to scream, to yell, to make her pay, but I knew this night would change everything. What happened next shook our entire neighborhood to its core. Stay with me, because you won't believe how this story unfolds. But first, comment the city you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Asterisk, welcome back, everyone. Before we get into the shocking story, I want to ask you, where are you watching from? Comment the city below. I'm curious to see which neighborhoods have had their fair share of drama like this. And hey, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because the twists in this story are going to leave you speechless. Now, let me set the scene. It was Christmas Eve, the kind of night that's supposed to be full of warmth, laughter, and memories you'll cherish forever. Our house was decked out in twinkling lights, the aroma of freshly baked cookies filling every corner, and my family gathered around the dining table, exchanging smiles and gentle laughter. My daughter, Lily, who is 6 and deaf, was signing excitedly to her brother about the presents she hoped to find. Her joy was infectious, lighting up the entire room. But then HOA Karen arrived. At first, she smiled, the kind of smile that seems polite, but something about it didn't feel right. There was a tension in the air, subtle but unmistakable. Karen had always had this uncanny ability to make everyone uncomfortable, and tonight, her presence felt like a storm waiting to break. I tried to push away the uneasy feeling and focus on Lily, making sure she felt safe and loved. Little did I know, in just a few moments, that Christmas dinner would turn into a nightmare no family should ever experience. Asterisk, it was Christmas Eve, the kind of evening that's supposed to be perfect in every way. Snow fell silently outside, covering the neighborhood in a soft, white blanket. Inside, our home smelled of roasted turkey and fresh pine from the Christmas tree. Warm lights twinkled, reflecting off ornaments and casting a golden glow across the living room. My daughter, Lily, 6 years old and deaf, was signing excitedly to her older brother, Max, about the gifts she hoped to find under the tree. She was full of life, her hands dancing through the air with excitement, and her smile could melt anyone's heart. I sat across from her, watching, feeling a sense of pride and happiness. This was our moment, a family moment, a moment where nothing else mattered. But little did I know, someone was about to shatter it. HOA Karen arrived without warning. She was carrying a wrapped gift, but the smile on her face didn't reach her eyes. There was a sharpness there, a cold glint that immediately made me tense. Karen had always been the type to micromanage our neighborhood, sending emails about trivial things, the wrong color mailbox, a crooked wreath, or leaves in the yard. Tonight, she was here in person, and I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't going to be a polite visit. She stepped into the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Oh, what a charming little setup," she said, her voice overly sweet, almost dripping with sarcasm. My family smiled politely, trying to ignore the edge in her tone. She glanced at the tablecloth, wrinkled slightly from being moved earlier, and smirked. "Is this new?" "Not sure it really matches your curtains," she added, tilting her head, as if delivering a subtle insult disguised as a comment. I felt my stomach tighten. I knew Karen. I knew what her visits could escalate to. I gently squeezed Lily's shoulder, signing, "It's okay, don't worry." Lily looked up at me, her eyes wide, sensing something was off but not fully understanding. As the dinner progressed, Karen's comments became more frequent. She made small critiques about the decorations, the arrangement of the plates, and even the choice of wine. Each word was sharp, deliberate, and aimed to unsettle. My spouse tried to brush it off with polite laughter, but I could see the discomfort spreading across the table like a shadow. Despite the tension, I kept my focus on Lily. She was the heart of this gathering, and her happiness mattered most. She signed to Max about a handmade ornament she had made, trying to distract herself from the unease in the room. Her innocence made my chest ache. She didn't deserve the storm about to hit us. Then came the first true sign of the danger lurking beneath Karen's smile. As I passed the mashed potatoes, she leaned in slightly, her eyes narrowing. "I hope your little girl isn't making too much noise," she said, her tone casual but loaded. My heart skipped a beat. It was a direct attack, aimed at Lily, subtle yet cutting. I could see Lily pause mid-sign, confused by the harshness in Karen's voice. I wanted to respond, to defend my daughter, but I held back. I had learned that confrontation with Karen often escalates things, and I needed to keep the evening under control for Lily's sake. But the tension was thick enough to choke on. Everyone at the table was aware, silently hoping she would leave without causing a scene. Then, a small moment that should have been innocent became another sign of the storm. Lily reached for her cup of juice, and Karen's hand shot out, tapping it slightly, almost knocking it over. "Careful, sweetie," she said, her smile tight. "Don't make a mess in my sight." Everyone froze. I felt a surge of protective anger, but I knew I had to keep calm. My mind raced. Why was she targeting my daughter? Why Christmas Eve? Karen spent the next few minutes circling the room, offering unsolicited advice and thinly veiled criticisms. She praised the tree, then immediately commented that a branch was slightly crooked. She admired the dessert, then complained that the plate was too small. Every word, every gesture was designed to unsettle. My family's laughter became strained. Max tried to make jokes to lighten the mood, but even he hesitated, sensing the tension building. I kept glancing at Lily. Her tiny hands trembled slightly as she signed a question to Max. Her confusion was heartbreaking. She had learned to navigate a world that often didn't understand her, but tonight she faced cruelty she couldn't easily interpret. My chest tightened with a mix of anger and helplessness. Then it happened. Karen, standing behind Lily, leaned down abruptly. Before anyone could react, she slapped my daughter across the arm. Not harshly enough to leave a mark, but enough to shock everyone into silence. The room froze. Lily's hands dropped mid-sign. Her eyes welled up with tears. My heart pounded in my chest, a combination of fear, anger, and disbelief. I couldn't speak at first. The words wouldn't come. All I could do was rush to Lily, gathering her in my arms, whispering, it's okay, I'm here." Karen just stood there, her expression a mix of feigned innocence and satisfaction. The neighbors who had been quietly observing were now staring in disbelief. Some mouths hung open, others clutched their wine glasses as if bracing for fight. In that moment, I realized something crucial. This wasn't just about a dinner, a tablecloth, or a crooked tree branch. This was about power, control, and cruelty. And Karen had chosen my daughter, the most vulnerable person in the room, as her target. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. How would I respond? How could I protect Lily without escalating the situation further? And most importantly, what would happen next? Because I had a feeling that the nightmare had only just begun. The moment HOA Karen's hand hit Lily, the room froze. The laughter, the music from the tiny Bluetooth speaker, the smell of cookies, all of it vanished in a heartbeat. Silence enveloped us like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Lily looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, confusion painted across her face. She didn't understand why someone would hurt her, especially tonight, the night meant for joy and warmth. I held her tightly, feeling her little body tremble, trying to offer the comfort words could not. Karen, on the other hand, didn't look remorseful. Her smile was sharp, calculated, and cruel. She tilted her head as if daring me to react, her voice sugar-coated but venomous. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she said, almost casually. "I was just teaching her a little discipline." My jaw tightened, my blood boiled. There were no words. How could someone say that after such a blatant act of cruelty? Everyone around the table sensed the tension. My spouse's face had gone pale, and Max looked as if he might explode. I could feel the neighbors' eyes on us, some in disbelief, others whispering to each other, unsure of whether they should intervene. But Lily, my sweet, innocent Lily, was the center of the storm, and it was tearing me apart to see her like this. I guided her to a chair at the far end of the table, still holding her hand. "It's okay, baby girl," I whispered, signing slowly so she could read my hands. Her lips quivered as she tried to respond, the words catching in her throat. I knew this was a turning point. From here on, nothing would feel safe again. Karen, sensing that she still had power, began to escalate her behavior. First, she criticized the food. "Did you make this yourself?" she asked, tasting the turkey with a raised eyebrow. It's acceptable, I suppose." Her tone was condescending, making it clear she thought our efforts were laughable. Every compliment carried a sting, every word dripping with judgment. Then came the passive-aggressive comments aimed at my family's way of interacting with Lily. "Oh, that's so cute how she signs. But are you sure she understands everything? Sometimes children need to be taught differently, don't they?" I could feel my chest tighten with rage. Who was she to judge how we raised our daughter, especially when she had no idea what it took to give Lily the love and care she deserved? But the cruelty didn't stop there. Karen started making small, sharp gestures, tapping her nails on the table loudly when Lily reached for something, leaning too close to interrupt our conversations, and giving exaggerated sighs when we tried to keep the mood light. Every action was deliberate, designed to unsettle, to provoke a reaction. At one point, she leaned over the table, pretending to inspect the centerpiece. "Is this homemade?" she asked with mock curiosity. "Oh, I see. Interesting choice. Not everyone would do it this way, but it works, I guess." Her words were like ice, and I could feel Max's fists clenching under the table. The neighbors shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to react. Despite the tension, I tried to maintain some semblance of control. I focused on Lily, making sure she could feel safety in my presence. I whispered to her, "It's okay, I've got you over and over." But I could see the hurt in her eyes, and it broke me into pieces. I couldn't believe that someone could be so cruel, especially in a place that should have felt safe, our home, surrounded by people we trusted. Karen's escalation reached a peak when she commented on Lily's Christmas gift. Lily had received a small stuffed animal earlier, and she was excitedly showing it to Max. Karen snatched it from her hands, just for a second, turning it over and scrutinizing it. "Not sure she needs something like this," she said, placing it back on the table with exaggerated carelessness. My blood boiled. The audacity of this woman, taking a child's gift and treating it like a meaningless object. I felt the room closing in, the energy thick with hostility. Even the neighbors were beginning to murmur, their whispers blending with the soft hum of the Christmas lights. Some avoided eye contact, others exchanged concerned glances, and a few, I noticed, were shaking their heads in silent disapproval. Then came the most heart-wrenching moment. Lily, trying to shield herself, signed quickly to me. Why did she hit me? Her hands trembled, and her eyes were glistening with tears. I knelt down to her level, taking her hands in mine, feeling the weight of my own helplessness. How could I explain that some people are cruel for no reason? How could I protect her in a world where HOA Karen existed? My mind raced, trying to figure out the next steps. Should I confront her? Should I call the police? Should I ask her to leave immediately? Each thought collided with the other, but I knew one thing: Lily's safety and emotional well-being were my absolute priority. Karen, sensing that I wasn't reacting the way she expected, shifted tactics. She moved closer, leaning over the table as if to assert dominance. Sometimes children need a little push to behave. Maybe she's just a bit spoiled, she said, her words dripping with condescension. Every syllable was meant to provoke, to make me react. I clenched my fists under the table, trying not to let my anger get the better of me. The rest of the dinner passed in a tense blur. Karen continued her subtle provocations, occasionally offering a backhanded compliment or a thinly veiled insult. I focused on Lily, feeding her, talking to her in signs, and keeping her as calm as possible. Max tried to keep the mood light with jokes, but even he faltered, sensing the underlying threat that Karen represented. By the time dessert was served, the room was charged with tension. The neighbors had quietly taken sides in their minds, some sympathetic, others passive, but all aware that something terrible had just happened. And I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Karen wasn't finished. Her cruelty had escalated, and now she was emboldened, ready to push further. As I cleared the last of the plates, I realized one stark truth. Tonight, our family had faced something more dangerous than I could have imagined, not just HOA Karen's hostility, but the very real fear that she could harm us emotionally and maybe worse. I vowed, silently, with every fiber of my being, that I would protect Lily, whatever it took. And I knew that the next confrontation, whatever form it took, would change everything. By the time the third course was served, the room was thick with tension. The air itself seemed heavier, charged with unspoken anger and fear. My heart was still racing from Karen's previous actions, the slap, the insults, the cruel little gestures that had steadily built like a storm around us. I kept glancing at Lily, who was now quietly signing to herself, trying to process everything. Her hands shook, her small brows furrowed, and the sparkle in her eyes had dimmed. Karen, sensing the discomfort, seemed to feed off it. She leaned back in her chair with that same cold, calculating smile, and began speaking louder than usual, as if daring someone to confront her. "You know," she said, swirling her wine glass unnecessarily, "children these days just don't know how to behave properly. It's all too lenient. They need discipline." Her gaze flicked toward Lily. That was it. The moment where every parent's worst fear becomes reality. Lily looked up at me, confusion and hurt in her eyes. I could see the question forming in her mind. Why would someone treat her this way? Before I could intervene, Karen suddenly leaned forward again, this time more aggressively. She smacked Lily, not a playful tap, but a harsh, sharp hit that sent the little girl's hands dropping in shock. The sound echoed in the room like a gunshot. Everyone froze. For a second, the world stopped. The neighbors, who had been sipping their drinks and exchanging awkward glances, went silent. My spouse's face turned ghostly white. Max opened his mouth, but no sound came out, and I felt a surge of anger so intense it felt like fire running through my veins. But I knew I had to stay composed for Lily. My little girl needed me calm, even when the rest of the world was falling apart. I rushed to her side, gathering her into my arms. Her lips quivered, tears threatening to spill. "It's okay, baby girl," I signed repeatedly, my own hands trembling. She looked at me, trying to understand, trying to find the safety she used to feel in my arms. Karen, however, seemed unmoved, almost satisfied with the chaos she had created. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I was only teaching her proper behavior. Sometimes children need to understand boundaries. She said it as if it were completely normal to hit a child in the middle of a Christmas dinner. I felt my blood boil. How could someone justify this? How could anyone be this cruel? The room's tension was unbearable. Some neighbors were shifting uncomfortably, whispering to one another, while others avoided eye contact entirely. No one knew whether to intervene or remain silent. But in that moment, I realized something crucial. We couldn't wait for anyone else to protect Lily. The responsibility was mine alone. I guided Lily to a chair far from Karen, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and rage. "Stay here, baby," I whispered. "I've got you." Her little hands clutched mine tightly, seeking reassurance in a world that had suddenly become frightening. My mind raced with questions. Should I call the police? Confront her directly? Evict her from our home? But the answer didn't matter yet. What mattered was protecting Lily in this very moment. Karen, sensing her power, wasn't finished. She leaned closer, whispering cruel remarks just loud enough for us to hear. Some parents spoil their children too much. Maybe she needs more structure. Every word was a weapon, designed to hurt, to destabilize, to control. I clenched my fists under the table, my teeth grinding in anger, fighting the urge to yell, to strike back, but I had to stay composed. Lily needed calm, not escalation. Then the neighbors, finally realizing the severity of the situation, started murmuring louder. A few of them stepped forward, their voices trembling. "That's enough," Karen stopped, but Karen waved them off, as if dismissing their authority, her eyes glinting with defiance. She had become untouchable in her own mind. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was no longer about a simple Christmas dinner. It was about protecting my family from a person who had crossed every boundary imaginable. I signed quickly to Lily, telling her to stay close and remain calm, while I slowly stood, facing Karen. "This stops now," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside me. "You are not going to hurt my daughter or anyone else again tonight." Her reaction was immediate. Karen's smile faltered for the first time, replaced by a flash of anger. "And what are you going to do about it?" she sneered. The room held its breath. The neighbors were watching, unsure whether to intervene, while Lily clung to my leg, her hands trembling. I knew I had to act carefully. This wasn't about a confrontation that could escalate physically. It was about standing my ground, protecting Lily, and exposing Karen's cruelty to everyone present. "I'm calling the authorities," I said calmly. "You are leaving this house, and you are never allowed to touch my daughter again." My voice carried a weight I hadn't known I possessed. The room was silent except for the soft crackling of the fireplace, and for a brief moment, even Karen seemed taken aback. As I moved to retrieve my phone, Karen hesitated. The neighbors exchanged glances, some nodding in silent support, while others reached for their own devices to call for help if necessary. The power dynamic was shifting, slowly but surely. And then, just as I dialed, something unexpected happened. Karen's face twisted in a way that suggested both panic and calculation. She dropped her act, muttering something under her breath about overreacting and dramatic parents. But it was clear. She realized the night had slipped out of her control, and for the first time, the storm she had been cultivating was about to turn back on her. I kept my focus on Lily, holding her close, whispering, signing, reassuring. She buried her face into my chest, her small hands gripping tightly, and for the first time in the evening, I felt a tiny flicker of relief. The worst had passed, for now, but I knew this confrontation was far from over. The unthinkable had happened, and the ripple effects would touch everyone in our community. Tonight had shattered the illusion of a perfect Christmas, exposing the dark side of someone we had once tolerated, someone we had thought was just difficult. Karen had revealed her true nature, and the consequences were just beginning. The house felt different after that night. The warmth of Christmas Eve was replaced by a tension that clung to every corner. The fireplace still crackled, the lights still twinkled, but the joy had been completely stripped away. My little girl, Lily, was curled up on the couch, her small body tense, eyes wide and wary. She had always felt safe at home, but after Karen's actions, that sense of security had been shattered. The neighbors began whispering among themselves, some shaking their heads, others exchanging worried glances. A few brave souls approached me in hushed tones. "Are you okay?" one neighbor asked, her voice trembling. Another whispered, "I can't believe she did that in front of everyone." Their concern was comforting, but it was also a stark reminder that Karen's cruelty had been on display for the entire neighborhood to see. I sat with Lily, gently brushing the tears from her cheeks. "It's okay, baby girl," I signed slowly, hoping the reassurance would reach her. "Mommy/Daddy is here. You're safe." She clung to me, trembling, and I could feel the emotional weight pressing down on both of us. My heart ached for her. I hated that she had been exposed to such cruelty, and I hated that I had been powerless to stop it in that exact moment. Meanwhile, Karen was pacing near the dining table, muttering to herself and attempting to regain some semblance of control. "This is ridiculous," she said, loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "I was only trying to help, teaching her boundaries. They're overreacting." The audacity was infuriating. Not only had she struck a child, but she also had the nerve to rationalize it. I realized in that moment that her actions were intentional. This wasn't a misjudgment. This was deliberate, calculated cruelty. The tension in the room made every small sound feel amplified. The clink of silverware, the soft shuffle of feet, even the faint creak of the stairs upstairs, all of it seemed magnified, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Max, my older son, sat silently, fists clenched on his lap, trying to process what had just happened. He glanced at Lily, his young mind struggling to reconcile the fact that someone could be so heartless. The conversation quickly turned to Karen's behavior. The neighbors, unsure whether to confront her directly, whispered among themselves, debating whether to call the authorities. Some were scared of retaliation, while others were angry that someone could act with such disregard for decency. I could see the internal struggle on their faces. They wanted to help, but were cautious, waiting for someone to take the first step. I made a decision. I could not sit quietly while Karen walked away unscathed. The safety and emotional well-being of my family came first, and I refused to allow this behavior to continue. I stood, my hands still trembling from the surge of adrenaline. "Karen," I said, my voice firm and unwavering, "this ends tonight. You will not harm my children or my family again. You're leaving this house now." Her eyes narrowed, a flash of anger crossing her face. "And what are you going to do about it?" she sneered, clearly expecting me to back down. But I didn't. I knew my daughter had already been hurt, and I could not allow fear or hesitation to dictate my response. I picked up my phone and dialed the authorities, my fingers shaking but steady enough to ensure the call went through. The neighbors, seeing my resolve, began to step forward. Some quietly filmed the interaction, while others prepared to give statements if needed. Karen's facade cracked further, her polite veneer slipping away to reveal frustration and panic. She realized that for the first time, the power dynamic had shifted. No longer was she in control. She was exposed, vulnerable, and accountable. As we waited for law enforcement, I stayed with Lily, whispering reassurances and holding her close. The fear in her eyes began to soften slightly, replaced by a fragile sense of relief that I was there, that she was safe for the moment. I knew the road ahead would be difficult. Karen would not take this lightly, and the repercussions would likely extend far beyond our living room. The aftermath of the incident also began to ripple through the neighborhood. People who had once tolerated Karen's behavior were now forced to confront her true nature. Rumors spread quickly, neighbors discussing in hushed voices how she had struck a child at a community event. The story quickly became a talking point, and everyone had an opinion. Some were supportive of us, expressing outrage and empathy, while others were cautious, worried about getting involved. I spent the rest of the evening documenting everything, writing down every detail, noting the reactions of neighbors, capturing the emotional state of my children, and preparing to share this evidence if needed. It was painful reliving the moments in my mind, but I knew it was necessary. Protecting Lily meant being meticulous, ensuring that no detail was overlooked and no opportunity for justice wasted. By the time the police arrived, the emotional toll was evident. Karen attempted to defend herself, claiming she had disciplinary intent, but the documentation, the witnesses, and the emotional distress of my children painted a starkly different picture. The officers took statements and ensured that we were safe for the rest of the night. Karen was ordered to leave, and it was made clear that any further contact would have serious legal consequences. As I sat with my children afterward, I felt a mix of relief, exhaustion, and lingering fear. The immediate danger had passed, but the emotional scars would take time to heal. Lily buried her face in my shoulder, and I held her tightly, silently vowing that I would do everything in my power to protect her from such cruelty in the future. That night, I realized something crucial. Cruelty can hide behind polite smiles, behind community involvement, behind the appearance of normalcy. But the truth always reveals itself, and when it does, it changes everything. Karen's actions had shaken us to our core. but they also revealed resilience and strength in my family that I hadn't fully recognized until that moment. The storm had passed, for now, but I knew this was only the beginning. Karen's behavior had consequences, and our next steps would not only protect our family, but also expose her true nature to the entire community. The days following that Christmas Eve were surreal. Our home, once warm and full of laughter, now carried the echo of Karen's cruelty. Lily was quieter, more cautious, and I could see her eyes scanning the room, as if expecting danger around every corner. I tried to reassure her constantly, holding her hands, signing softly, and surrounding her with as much love as possible. But there was a lingering tension in the house, an invisible shadow that seemed to stretch over every meal, every conversation, every ordinary moment. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened, a revelation that no one, not even I, could have anticipated. A neighbor, Mrs. Harper, who had been quietly observing the situation from her porch that night, approached me. She was an older woman, known in the neighborhood for her kindness and discretion. But now her expression was grave. "I think you need to know something about Karen," she said, her voice low and urgent. "She's not just difficult, she's dangerous. And she's done this before." My heart skipped a beat. "Done what before?" I asked, my voice tight, a mixture of fear and disbelief. Mrs. Harper hesitated, then leaned closer. Years ago, she had a run-in with another family. A child, similar age, something happened, and the police were involved. She's always managed to cover it up, but she has a pattern of targeting families she doesn't like. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. The cruelty, the calculated provocations, the subtle manipulations, all of it was part of a pattern. Karen wasn't just a difficult neighbor, she had a history, and my family had become her next target. As I absorbed this information, I realized that the events of Christmas Eve were not isolated. Karen had a hidden side, a side that she had carefully concealed behind polite smiles, community involvement, and a facade of normalcy. And now, her actions had consequences that could extend far beyond a single dinner. The twist didn't end there. Later that day, while reviewing security footage from our home, I noticed something alarming. Karen hadn't just struck Lily, she had lingered near the living room after the incident, quietly observing, as if waiting for the perfect moment to escalate further. Her intentions had been premeditated. The slap was deliberate, a test of boundaries, and she had been watching to see how far she could push us. I shared this revelation with the authorities, who were shocked. They confirmed that Karen's pattern of behavior, targeting children, creating emotional distress, and instilling fear, was consistent with several reports they had received over the years. But because she was careful, no formal charges had stuck. Until now, the neighborhood reaction was immediate. Families who had once tolerated Karen's presence began to speak up, sharing their own experiences of subtle harassment, intimidation, and emotional manipulation. It was as if a dam had broken. Everyone who had felt powerless was suddenly emboldened by our courage to stand up. Even more shocking, one of our neighbors, Mr. Thompson, came forward with a piece of information that changed everything. He had been documenting Karen's behavior for years, emails, notes, and photographs of her meddling in other families' lives. When he handed me the evidence, my hands trembled. It was enough to legally hold her accountable, something that previous victims had never been able to do. In the middle of all this, I realized that the twist wasn't just about exposing Karen. It was about how a community could come together when faced with a clear injustice. Neighbors who had been silent were now allies. Witnesses who had been afraid to speak were stepping forward. And most importantly, Lily was beginning to understand that the world was not entirely cruel, that people could protect her and fight alongside her. But the real shock came when Karen tried to manipulate the situation again. She appeared at our doorstep one morning, pretending to be apologetic, claiming that she didn't mean any harm, and that it was all a misunderstanding. I could see the desperation in her eyes, but it was clear that she had underestimated the ripple effect of her actions. The neighborhood was united, the authorities were involved, and her carefully crafted facade was crumbling. That Christmas Eve, the slap had seemed like the end of the story, but in reality, it was the beginning of a revelation that shook the entire community. Karen's true nature was exposed, the neighbors rallied, and the evidence she had tried to hide finally came to light. It was a twist no one expected, a moment of justice hidden behind a night of fear and pain. In the end, what shocked everyone wasn't just the act itself. It was the uncovering of years of hidden cruelty, the realization that one person's malice could ripple outward and impact so many lives. And yet, through it all, there was a glimmer of hope, a family that stood together, a community that refused to stay silent, and a little girl learning that she was loved and protected. That twist, Karen's hidden history, the support of the community, and the evidence coming to light, was more powerful than any slap or insult. It transformed fear into action, cruelty into accountability, and despair into hope. And it reminded everyone watching that sometimes the darkest nights reveal the brightest lights. After the shocking revelation about Karen's history and premeditated actions, our neighborhood was never the same. What had once been a quiet, seemingly ordinary community now felt charged with a sense of justice, vigilance, and solidarity. People began speaking up. Neighbors who had previously endured Karen's subtle cruelties now found the courage to confront her. Their whispers became statements. Their fear transformed into resolve. And for the first time, my family and I felt that the nightmare of that Christmas Eve might finally be behind us. Lily, however, was still fragile. In the days after the incident, she clung to me constantly, reluctant to be alone, and hesitant even to play freely. Every sudden sound or movement made her startle, and I could see the fear in her eyes. But gradually, through patience, reassurance, and unwavering presence, she began to reclaim her sense of safety. Each day, I reminded her, "You are safe. I've got you. We're a team." And slowly, the sparkle in her eyes returned, even if just a little at first. Meanwhile, the authorities were fully involved. With the evidence from Mr. Thompson, the statements from neighbors, and the detailed account of the Christmas Eve incident, Karen could no longer hide behind her polite facade. Legal action was taken, and it became clear to the entire neighborhood that her manipulations, harassment, and emotional cruelty had consequences. The community collectively realized the importance of standing up, not just for ourselves, but for our children and anyone who might be vulnerable. The neighborhood meetings that followed were transformative. Families shared their stories, revealing how Karen had interfered, intimidated, or subtly undermined them over the years. Listening to each account, I was struck by a sense of collective strength. Together, we had formed a shield, turning fear into empowerment. The unity was powerful. Neighbors who had barely spoken before now collaborated, created support networks, and made plans to prevent such incidents in the future. For our family, the journey to healing was deeply personal. We sought therapy for Lily, ensuring she could process the trauma and regain confidence in her world. Max, who had witnessed the aggression firsthand, also received guidance to understand his feelings of anger and helplessness. And my spouse and I learned the importance of vigilance and proactive protection, of recognizing subtle signs of cruelty before they escalated. We realized that love alone wasn't enough. Preparedness, awareness, and community engagement were equally vital. The resolution also brought unexpected allies. Some neighbors offered emotional support, others practical help, like accompanying us to HOA meetings or walking Lily to school. These acts, small but meaningful, reminded us that even in the darkest moments, there is light in human connection. Our family's experience became a catalyst for a stronger, more united community, one that refused to allow fear or cruelty to dominate. As the weeks passed, Lily began to smile more freely again. She signed jokes to Max at the dinner table, twirled around the living room in front of the Christmas lights, and even laughed when I pretended to chase her with a marshmallow in hand. Those moments were small, but they were victories. Every laugh, every sign, every glimmer of joy was a testament to resilience, a refusal to let Karen's actions define our lives. Karen, on the other hand, faded into the background. Legal restrictions kept her at a distance, and her reputation, once carefully maintained, was now transparent for everyone to see. The very facade she had relied upon to control, intimidate, and manipulate was gone. Her presence no longer cast a shadow over our home or our hearts. This story, as shocking and painful as it was, carries a lesson for everyone. Evil often hides behind polite words, appearances, or societal norms. But it is never invincible. Courage, unity, and action can expose it. By standing together, documenting the truth, and prioritizing the safety of our loved ones, we can transform fear into empowerment. And in doing so, we protect not only ourselves, but also our children, our families, and our communities. To everyone watching this story, remember, your voice matters, your vigilance matters, and your actions can create a ripple effect of justice and hope. If you've ever witnessed cruelty, whether subtle or blatant, don't stay silent. Document it, speak up, and reach out for support. Protect your loved ones, and inspire others to do the same. Finally, I want to leave you with this. Lily's courage, our family's resilience, and the community's unity remind us all that even in the darkest moments, there is hope. We cannot control the cruelty of others, but we can control how we respond and how we protect those we love. So, here's what I want you to do. If this story resonated with you, comment below the city you're watching from and share your own experiences. Tell us your stories of courage, community, and standing up for what's right. Like this video to spread awareness, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories that reveal the shocking, the emotional, and the life-changing moments in people's lives. Together, we can ensure that darkness never goes unchecked, and that every child, like Lily, knows they are safe, loved, and protected. Because sometimes a single act of courage can ignite a movement. And in our case, it changed an entire neighborhood forever. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it so others can see the truth about standing up for what's right. Comment below the city you're watching from. I want to know where the story is reaching, and I want to hear your own experiences with difficult neighbors or standing up for your loved ones. Most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We share stories like this every week, stories of courage, resilience, and shocking twists that remind us all that even in the darkest moments, there's hope. Remember, your voice matters, your actions matter, and together we can protect our families, support our communities, and ensure that cruelty is never left unchecked. So, join us, share your story, and become part of a community that stands up for what's right. Asterisk,